toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance.
So it's great to be with all of you. This is the second in the Imaginal Faculty series. And tonight, I'm happy to begin an introduction here, linking us back with the Zoroastrian tradition that some of us went through in some of the other series that we've offered, and others may not know so much about it. I would turn you to the book Spiritual Body, Celestial Earth by Henry Corbin if you'd like to know more about that connection. But anyway, we have this inheritance through the Zoroastrian tradition, which really is the parent religion of Judaism and Islam and Christianity, and has so much to offer in terms of light, in terms of the ideas of the transfiguration of the earth. And we have the fun opportunity right now of being the future to these beings in the past, and being those who are receiving this message. We're speaking about the messenger. And here's an inheritance of wisdom from thousands of years ago. And I think you believe, like I do, that they are listening somehow, and they are going to be filled with joy that there are beings in this century that are receiving this word, and not only receiving, but taking it to new levels. So there are generally 4 different elements of what we could call geosophy in other traditions. And in their tradition, it was what we would inherit from the archangel called Sventa Armidi. Our relationship with this angel is key in us becoming those who are going to help transfigure the earth. So this is what was given to us. First of all, the first idea is that we would be the son, we would pledge, or we would realize that we are the sons and daughters of Sventa Armidi, or the archangel of the earth. This means that we are in the same family as an archangel. We are not just little specks in the universe. We are related to, and not only related to, we are inheritors of what this archangel is all about. So, and I'd like to put this in more contemporary language so that we can use this in terms of our imaginal faculty. We are coexistent with the divine, sharing in the divine powers and creative potential in our relationship. And another word for what this is that we've been working with recently is the relational unity, that Azarbash coined that term and has explained to us very well, and maybe will give us a little bit more about it in a few minutes. So this is our opportunity to realize that the way that we've thought of ourselves, the way that we've thought of our existence up until this point has been very limited. We've used the word truncated. It has been severely limited, but we must also be thankful for what we are living through and what we have manifested on the earth, and look forward to what can come from this relationship with the divine. So that's the first aspect of this process, called geosophy in some terms, because that's really using the imagination that we are given to make a change in the world. So that's the idea of geo and Sophie, meaning wisdom, the wisdom of the earth. So the second we could call them element in this process then. And these are all very important realizations, I would say. First one being to know that you are the son or daughter of the archangel of the earth. Now the second one is we're directed to open the house of the divine within us. So what does that mean, to open the house of the divine? One interpretation could be that we can increase our sense of dimensionality. Imagine this house unfolding within us, but not only a three-dimensional house, a many-dimensional house. We can include all the realms in our subtle anatomy in this realization. And we've talked about this in terms of the interface also. We can increase our sense of dimensionality, unfolding an interface between the subtle and the manifest, which can become like a mirror of creation and transformation. So this is called either the mirror or the barzakh or the meeting place, but it is the place at which there is a workability. This is kind of our place of, or it's our studio, you could say. It's our place where we can work this magic that we are learning about, that not only is including all the divine, but also this dimensionality, so that whatever we're experiencing can be reaped, can be given, can be gifted to all different realms. Well, which different realms? Well, it all depends on you and what you are capable of imagining. So sometimes I think of the things that we do, we think of it as just taking place in this very small arena. But if we begin to think about what is our entire arena, and we start to get some inklings too about these dimensions, then what we have, we can share with way more than we thought. So the third idea here, the third aspect, we could call it, of this imaginal faculty was what was said to us before as that we would hold the perfect thought of wisdom. This is what was told to the beings in the Zoroastrian tradition. So this perfect thought of wisdom is what we are working with, is the imaginal faculty, also called the imagination, or the true imagination, or the royal imagination. And it is that quality that itself can be the way we modulate our consciousness. In other words, the way we think, the way we reflect, the way we use our subtle energies. These are all in the realm of that imaginal faculty. And of course, the whole class will be about that, so we'll continue to work with this. And then the last of these aspects I'm bringing to you is the idea that we accomplish this through our essential individuality or our uniqueness. And through this uniqueness, salvation, our salvation becomes the salvation of the world. So now we're not just working our spiritual practices for ourselves to go along a path, an individuated path. My goodness, that's a very truncated view of what we're doing. It has an effect on all of the creation, so that we can now participate as a unique being in the transformation of the world. And you may remember the statement, may we be among those who are to participate in the transfiguration of the earth. What a difference. What an incredible opening of vistas. So enter in.
So how do we go about utilizing this faculty of the soul, the imagination? Well, when we hear the word imagination, as it's commonly used, it's often associated with just fantasy and random thoughts. Uh, but in a way, all of us are using our imagination to create a worldview that, until we undergo a degree of awakening, is a very limited one. So in other words, uh, our imaginations are very good at projecting a continuation of just a little bit more of what's already happened within a very narrow range of possibilities. So this is the realm of the physical senses. This is the realm of our concepts about what we're experiencing. This is the realm of our emotional reactions to what we're experiencing. And within that, our imaginations over time cause us to carve out a sense of identity which just exists within that very narrow realm. So in other words, we think that that's all that we are, and we think that what we're experiencing is all that there is. So how do we break free from that? Well, last time we introduced the idea of hotspots. Uh, and these are like things that just occurrences that could be people, it could be circumstance, seemingly random sorts of things that are openings that can, if we can connect with them in a good way, can open us up to a much richer way of experiencing things. So how do we do that? How do we take advantage of these when they come along? Well, Rabani Ram mentioned something we've talked about many times in the previous series, which is relational unity. Generally, we are in a separated state of consciousness and a separated state of identification. This is me, and everything else is something separate from me, both in physical manifestation, but also in how we relate to the transcendent realm or to the divine, however we think of what the divine is. Initially, we experience that as something far removed from ourselves and separated from ourselves. And so relational unity means establishing a resonance, a connection with what we're experiencing. So there's a flow back and forth. There's a circulation of light back and forth. Last time I introduced the idea of wave interference, and those of you on the share list, I sent out some pictures of waves interfering with other waves. And I mentioned that there are two kinds of wave interference. One's called constructive, and this is when two waves are in resonance with each other, and then you put them together and you have a third wave that's the sum of those two. It's something more than those two waves. But you can have destructive interference, and that's if you have one wave that's the opposite of the other. And this is what you have in noise canceling headphones. It makes the opposite wave of the ongoing sound in the background, which is good because then you don't hear anything at all. But we don't want that in trying to open up a deeper connection with what we are experiencing. So we want to come into a kind of harmonic relationship with what we are experiencing. So this is something that will enable us to break out of the constricted, pure light. We talk about sclerosed, kind of like hardening of the arteries state of being that we tend to exist in, to a much more fluid state of being. So we can do this through spiritual practices, and we will talk a lot more about this in the coming sessions, but we can also do this with simple awareness in circumstances we find ourselves in during the day, particularly the ones that we get caught up in. So what's a red flag? Well, red flag can be warning things, but they also can be indicators of turn this way instead of that way. So red flag is when you start to feel like you're pulling back, constricting, withdrawing, but you catch yourself and you go, well, what will enable me to come into a state of relational unity with this person, with this circumstance, with whatever it might be? And then something is going to open up. And that opening up will take place through perhaps one of the divine qualities, such as compassion, such as an appreciation of beauty in something, such as seeing beneath the surface appearance of something. It could be you're dealing with a very difficult person and you're just saying, this is a god-awful person. I wish they would just go away. But then you remember everything is a unique expression of the divine being. And perhaps this person doesn't know that, and they've really gotten caught up and encased in this identification with a very unpleasant way of relationship. But if you can allow yourself to see past that, and you can see the Pure Light would say, like, see someone's divine countenance behind the face, that physical face that you see, and there's always a light underneath the surface there. And once you can do that, things are going to begin to change.
Okay.
So, want me to go on?
Yeah, let's go on.
Okay. So, I guess both Ravani Ra and I like to talk about different stages of things, and she's outlined the ones in the Zoroastrian tradition. So here I'm trying to describe going from limitation to a much more opened up place, and they're very parallel to what she's saying. So let's say you are beginning to get past that. You're getting past this reactive cutoff stage, and now you are trying to bring some very positive things into your physical reality, which is wonderful. I mean, maybe you're doing service, and maybe you're being very kind to people and so on, but you still have a sense of separation. Well, all of that is good. You've moved up from this just totally cut off reactive stage to one where there's the start of something more that's beginning to come through. But then as you continue to progress, turn to your inner experiences, and you can go, well, Ravani Ra and Azarbash are talking about this idea of multi-dimensional being. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. I wonder what that could be. Well, you can just take it as a working hypothesis, and you could take it that, well, many people over the centuries, mystics of all different traditions have talked about these subtle realms of reality. So unless all of them have gone off the deep end, there's probably something to it. Now, they all have their different systems, and you don't have to adopt any one particular system or buy into this cosmology or that one, but they're just different, just like we have different names for the colors in the electromagnetic spectrum, and they're very different across cultures. They're just different ways of parceling up one reality. Different spiritual traditions have different ways of parceling out these subtle realms. So sometimes Sufis say, well, there's 7 planes, or no, there's 14 planes, and Christianity might have this heaven and that heaven, and it really doesn't matter. There are images and there are metaphors to help you connect with a more subtle level of reality. And initially, we think of those subtle levels as separated from ourselves. Like, okay, I'm going to concentrate real hard, and I'm going to get myself into the angelic realm, and I'm going to have an experience. Well, perhaps that works. Perhaps you have a temporary hall. HAL means a temporary experience of the angelic realm, but then you come back to your usual consciousness and you think, well, that was really wonderful, but that was up there and I'm here, and that doesn't have much to do with this. But as you continue, Pure Light would talk about stereoscopic consciousness, and he would talk about toggling, and some of you have heard this before, which is like going from this state of awareness to that state, back and forth, back and forth. But at a certain point, you can enter into what I like to call multimodal consciousness, where you experience both of those subtle vibrational states and the manifest state as just different aspects of your own being. They're not off someplace else. They're all co-present and coexistent, and you can experience a circulation of light between those, which is going on all the time. And when you become aware of it, it enhances the effect of that. And we can't be conscious of all the different levels on which we exist all at once, but we can experience ourselves in a unitive state of identity, and that's kind of the background of it all. Just like it would be pretty hard to be conscious of what's going on in your lymphatic system, your circulatory system, your respiratory system, all the neuronal connections in your brain, your hormones, and this. You don't need to be. They're all part of one community that forms you, but they're all part of your identity of yourself as one being. So we can come to that. So that's a necessary stage to get into. And how do we enable ourselves to do that? Well, we've talked before about having a scaffolding, something that enables us to have a connection between our usual state of consciousness and a more subtle state that we experience. Because if we don't build that scaffolding, then we'll have a wonderful experience, and afterwards we'll know, well, that was really great, but nothing much is left of it. And then we're just hoping to get back to that at the expense of being able to function here, which is not adaptive at all. So what helps us be able to make that bridge? Well, one is images. Many of you have worked with what are called the landscapes of the soul, like the imagery for the landscape of pure spirit is being high in the mountains above the tree line at night, and just lit by the moon. And there's just the beginning of the snow melting at the top, and it's starting to trickle down the mountain, and it's forming a stream, and this stream is the waters of life. So that's the most beautiful, wonderful image that helps you get into the state of being, of experiencing what pure spirit is about. And there's other landscapes like that for the other realms. So these are some tools that enable us to shift, to get out of our usual separated state of consciousness into a much more wonderful state of experience, and then establish a connection with our grounded state.
Okay. Well, I can enter in also with the idea of how we can establish our, you say, a community of beings that are a part of our inner life and also a part of our manifest life. An example would be, we talked about an angel, that we'd have not only communication with the angel, but the idea of feeding the angel, that we somehow give an image to, or a way of seeing this part of ourself, our expanded self in the subtle realms, and then feel that a lot of, or all of the things that we're accomplishing in our lives, especially those transformational parts of our life, when we make a breakthrough, but also the parts of us that we feel could use some care and loving, that we feed the angel with these feelings and then feel back from the angel. So again, it was kind of like Azarbash's description of scaffolding. It's something you do set up, perhaps, as a fantasy in a way, but then you can live into that and feel, wow, this really does mean something to me. And I think maybe this was really always there and I didn't even notice before. And now I'm setting it up, but it's really that it's been there all the time. So the scaffolding now has gotten us to a place where we do have this realization. And one of the ones that I've recently thought of is the feeling of a compassionate witness that witnesses my life, that witnesses the things that are difficult for me, or that witnesses the glory and the joy that I take in different things. And it's a wonderful practice. And in fact, I had a little bit more to offer to you about that. I say, I'd like to think of it as a witness to our flow of energy also. So what if we had a witness that was unbiased, just watching the quality of are Svarna. So this is a word from the Zoroastrians again that means the light of glory. You could say your inspiration, your the rise of light within you that you feel. So this being could be watching your own realization and adventure in terms of the spirit. You could have this being notice the stream of consciousness, how the thoughts and feelings flow, and what you react to, and how some things might freeze you up, be difficult for you. And this witness could notice when you manage to engage an instant of time that breaks the flow, as we talked about before, the knife that slices through things and brings a new instant that can change everything. And it could be a monitoring that helps you engage new dispensations that take you from old patterns. So imagine that you had this witness with you that was compassionately absorbing and reacting to, and just being this companion through all of life's difficulties. It could also connect us more firmly to the sources of our inspiration, like beings in the past or beyond life, and experience all these breaking through of consciousness and realization, inspiration through time. So this could be one way of using the imagination to first set it up, but then hopefully realizing, well, that was there all the time anyway. So I suggest you might try something like that. Would you like to come in with anything else?
Well, I'm thinking about ways that we can use our imagination to help us plug into a broader band of experience. And we've talked about kind of the one-on-one part of it, like you engaging in an experience of relational unity, let's say with another person. Okay, and that would be in the horizontal dimension. And in the vertical dimension, which is the transcendent dimension, it would be you coming into a relationship with what Ibn Arabi calls your personal angel or your personal Lord, making it something very intimate and real. And so it's important for that, just like Hazrat Inayat Khan says, each person needs to come up with their own God ideal, which may change many times along the journey. It could be God the Father, God the Mother, God the beloved, and so on. But something that enables us to use our imagination to establish this intimate relationship that is going to enable this two-way flow of light, but also with that light of information, the information that is carried on that light. Okay, so those are two different directions. But now let's take a look at a way that we can kind of open that up in a different way. Anyone that's part of a spiritual path, a spiritual group, and has received an initiation, then you've entered into a transmission with the lineage, the beings that have come before. Vani Ra was mentioning the Zoroastrians, and there's a transmission of that. And so that's a living transmission. But usually we think of that as just, well, we want to open up to what's coming from all these marvelous beings, which is fabulous. I mean, that's an incredible source of insight and blessing and so on. But we can imagine entering to a state of relational unity with this transmission. What does that mean? It means that Ravani Ram mentioned uniqueness. We are each a unique being. And so when we can connect with that particular flavor, that transmission that's associated with a particular tradition or school within a particular tradition, then something is added to it that can only come from us. And now there's an interplay between what comes from our being and all that's come from before. And it just is a never-ending process of more and more enrichment that we can engage in. So these are some ways that are simple to describe, but very potent ways of really deepening our spiritual experience. And the same applies when we work with the divine names. And those of you that were in on the previous series, we've talked about this many times, but some of you are new. So the Sufis often work with any of the divine names, and they're in Arabic. And there's some languages that are sacred languages. Arabic is one, Sanskrit is one, Hebrew is one, where the words are not arbitrary. Each word carries the vibration of what it represents. So it's like the word is the meaning of itself. And in times past, when someone studied with a Sufi teacher, the teacher would give the student practices, but they would not be told what they meant, because the student was to discover what the practice meant by it revealing itself to them by the vibration of it. So when we work with a practice, we can open up to all that's been acquired in those vibrations by all the people who have ever worked with it throughout time, which is, I mean, it's been enriched tremendously. But then there's something that's added to that practice when we do it. So what's key about this is that the practice each time we do it is not the same as it was the last time, because the practice has changed us, but we've also changed the quality of that practice. So we have this feedback loop going on. And this is a very important principle in spirituality, the idea of feedback loops, of one thing transforming another, transforming the first thing, and you can't really pull out, well, this one started or that one started there. It's this, in Buddhism, it's called mutual or dependent co-arising. Each one is the cause of the change in the other, but we're just kind of stepping into that flow. And so we can use our imagination to help us be able to do that.
And that's a wonderful one. And I wrote this before class, and it fits in totally here. To be ready, as we progress, everything is changed. Our relationship with the divine, our perception to manifest in subtle realms, the thought of wisdom, our unique way to remake the world. And these are all going to continue to evolve. So a few minutes ago, I talked about the compassionate witness. Well, how about you as the compassionate witness, watching all of these changes as they happen in your own life? An incredible unfolding of all these possibilities and your choices, and as this affects everything else. Now, of course, like Azurbash said, you can't be tuning into all at once. But the beauty is that our hearts are our guides in this, and our hearts unfold those things that are our own. It's kind of a little miracle. It's like our own version of this grand life or universe unfolds those things that are our own and that we recognize. And as we go through our spiritual path, some of these parts that we haven't been familiar with for a while come to us in the form of what Pirzia called marriages, where there's a remembrance of a part of ourself that comes, and now there's a widening of this unfolding that's happening to us. But we can be that witness, and I actually have a practice ready. And that practice is Ya Rahman. One word for this is bountiful generosity. But it's a wonderful practice of what we were just speaking about. Here's some things about it. It releases us from possessiveness. Okay, so there's the release from this truncation kind of thing that happens to us, thinking that, oh, this is our own possessed thing that's pulled off from everything else, rather than nested within everything else. It helps us to promote our own creativity, it says, to give life to latent inspiration. So those things that are latent inspirations, kind of just dwelling within that subtle space within us, now is given life to be part of our life, part of our manifestation, not only something that is a potential or a possibility, but something that now is just bubbling through our own life. So feel that bubbling through in this idea of Ya Rahman. And here's one more little paragraph that helps us get the feeling of what Rahman really means. As the spirit of a saint at last becomes attuned to that of the whole universe, he or she is in tune with all climates, with the weather, with nature, with all the animals and birds, and he or she becomes in tune with all atmospheres, with all human beings of various natures, because he or she becomes the keynote of the whole universe. So this is Ya Rahman. So I'll begin, and that's right. It's spelled Rahman. And it starts with Ya, which means hail, or O, as if you're greeting this being, or this part of your own being that is emerging in this experience. Ya Rahman. So I'll begin and say it about 3 times and then ask you to come in. And again, the way we work with it is we have a meaning that we're thinking of at the beginning, but then remember that everything is changing as we're participating here, and it'll unfold to you as you say the word, Ya Rahman. So here we go. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman. Please join me. Ya Rahman, 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 Ya
Rahman,
Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya. Let's pause for a moment. So remember that every time you say it, everything has been transformed. Ya Rahman, 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 Ya Rahman. One more. Ya Rahman. Now as you exhale, think Rahman. And as you inhale, you just inhale. Feeling that you're giving life to latent inspiration, attuned to the whole universe. And now not thinking about inhaling or exhaling, just thinking of the meaning behind what we were thinking of. Amen. And for those of you who like to have an archetype for your practice, Kuan Yin was given as the archetype for this practice. Would you like to go on?
Yeah. So we've been talking about different ways we can open up this faculty of imagination. And when we can do this, and we talked about just even working with the practice, making the practice really come alive, feeling how ourself and the practice is transformed by each time we say that. But imagine, here you can use your imagination, what it would be like to go about your life in the world where there was always this feeling of freshness and renewal and openness and emergence of what was coming through. The Sufis say the new creation that takes place at every moment. The difference between that and the usual state of affairs of, well, okay, let's see, it's Thursday and here's what I need to do today, and can't wait till the weekend gets here because then I'm going to be able to do such and such. But just the difference between that and making or feeling all the things that happen in our life as so alive and so revelatory. Like everything is a hot spot. We're a hot spot. Everything we encounter is a hot spot, and it just remains to be revealed what's going to come from all those. It's not sitting there preformed. It is created as we go along. So that's a very, very different way of experiencing our life. And we can think about these temporary experiences that many of us have probably had, these hall experiences, and even the significant events in our life and on our spiritual journey. You can kind of imagine a catalog of it, like snapshots. But then what happens if instead of you imagining them as, well, there was this one, and then there was this period of time, and then there was that one, of really seeing how everything ties together in your life, that everything has contributed to all that has arisen in your being and all of your realizations and so on, and that all of it then becomes part of what the Sufis call the allegory of your soul. It's your story. So you can think of a story. One way you could think of a story is, well, I've already read that one. I don't really want to look at that again. And another way would be, this is something brand new. I don't know what's going to happen. And in a way, you're creating the story as it goes along. And the story is being created through all these harmonic relationships that you're establishing with whatever it is that you are experiencing in your life. Well, just think about how much richer your life would become if you're able to do that. Well, you are able to do that. What keeps you from being able to do that? The hold that your well ingrained imagination has on your worldview which, like I said earlier tonight, has its own story, but that story is very limited. There's just certain bounds to it, and there's this predictability about what's going to happen, not just with you, but with other people that you interact with, and even the projected timeline of your life. There's this kind of certain limitation about what you expect is going to happen. But what if all that just became something so fresh? Well, what does it take to do that? It takes, the dervishes do the whirl, the turn. Well, what about the turn of your vantage point that is a shift from locked in here to this open, connected way of experiencing things in your life? Even try that thought on for just a moment and see what happens. You don't have to conceptualize all of that, but just put it in there and see what happens. What do you feel? See if you feel a spark of something. Make God a reality, and God will make you the truth. Each of us is a living embodiment and expression of the divine being, seeking to discover him herself in a never-ending process, seeking to love him herself through the connections with all the forms of the divine in manifestation, in the realm we're familiar with, and all the more subtle realms of being. There's this never-ending process of discovery. And it isn't the old notion of the omnipotent God sitting up there and just waiting for us to kind of get with the program and go back where we came from. Everything, the transcendent end, the manifest end, is engaged in this process of unfoldment of wisdom. That our life is the means for that to take place. So all of existence is a never-ending alchemical process, the fruit of which is emergent wisdom that never ends, that comes through in the new creation.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of this unfolding wisdom, we've spoken of the term tawil, and it's the idea that we can look at something in nature, let's say a leaf, and in looking at that leaf, see what is beyond the leaf, either through harmonic perception was one of the words that we have for that, but it's the stages through which this leaf came into existence, including through the subtle realms, or it is just looking at the leaf and having many joyous realizations, almost like conversations with the leaf itself. But whatever that realization is, that's just a precursor to the real realization of this leaf that is a signal to us and a realization of our soul. It's part of our soul awakening. And it is really learning something about ourselves in everything that we're looking at. And this is not in a self-conscious or egotistical kind of way. It is kind of like the story I was telling you a little bit earlier about somehow your story is being told in everything that is happening in your life. This is a great unfoldment and a great realization that there is no separation between them. And it's all, it'll be given to you many times if you didn't see it the other time. You could almost go down the street right now. There's plenty of leaves on the street when I take a walk on the sidewalk, when I take a walk. And I could think of, well, here's this leaf and here's this leaf. And it's almost like I have to unfold that part of my being that is multifaceted just to love all of the leaves that are on the sidewalk. And I can just feel that happening and just saying, oh, look at this. I'm a daughter of Sventa Almighty, and it's possible for me to love every leaf that I'm walking on. And then some of the leaves actually are speaking enough that I have to pick them up and I have to make art with them. And here's something else that I brought, just kind of, I think you can kind of see this. This is a stamp that I've made, which has interlocking leaves. And it'll be a piece of art that I'm going to be making. And as I make pieces of art or things that I'm going to use in creating pieces of art, then I can dedicate everything that I'm making to all the leaves that I was walking upon and that I love, and their families. And there's really no end to the possibilities of just enjoying this moment and how special that it is, whatever that we're doing. Of course, nature has so much to give to us. We're still enjoying the sunrises and the trees and the new sprouting basil that I have on my windowsill waiting for its chance to go outside. So I'm thinking that what we think of as imaginal or the imagination is just such a small part of what our imaginal faculty really is about. It's about that meaningfulness of everything that's happening in our lives. And us being separate from all that is a little illusion, but it is true that it is this being that is in touch with all that there is. Boy, that was long, but it's a feeling of the oneness and at the same time that particular. And the particular, every one is just so valuable and cherished. And to be able to be the bridge that actually makes that communication possible is just too much to bear. And we have that opportunity.
So we've been talking about imagination, and oftentimes people talk about in the spiritual journey, well, I want to learn how to get into a higher state of consciousness. So we learn how to access these subtle realms, to experience the consciousness of this realm or of that realm. But that's just really a starting point. I mean, being able to modulate, as we say, consciousness to these different vibrational states of focalization. But then the imaginal faculty has to do with, well, what do we do with our consciousness? How do we direct it towards a purpose? And it could be, the purpose could be deepening, a desire for deeper understanding and wisdom. It could be for a desire to participate in what we call the human divine co-creative process, to bring something through that comes through this relationship between the subtle and manifest aspects of being. So imagination is the tool, we could say, by which we can operate with our consciousness for a particular purpose. So I'd like to take us through a little meditation. So close your eyes. And let's seed this little meditation with just let yourself have an anticipation for what's next, because you don't know what I'm going to say or what you might discover or experience in this meditation. So just let yourself begin by having that feeling of open anticipation, kind of a scintillating feeling. And in our Sufi invocation, we talk about the perfection of love and then harmony. So let's have the focus be on harmony. We've talked about relational unity, this state of connection and circulation with whatever we are experiencing. So choose a being, choose a great being that you feel an affinity with. It could be a master, saint, a prophet. And let yourself go beyond your historical information about that being or your concepts about that being. Birbalite would say that we can tune into the cosmic nature of that being as they are now, not limited to their historical personality. So you're just allowing yourself to, as the Sufis say, attune to that being. And when you feel like a connection is starting, then allow yourself to harmonize. Allow the light of your being to harmonize with the light of that other one's being. So now you have this, what I described as constructive wave interference that waves add. They're in sync with each other. Something more arises than could come from even this great being alone or you alone. So in this feeling of harmony with this great being, each of you is changed by the light of the other. And something arises, the Sufis say a third presence arises. Something's been born that was never there before. And you can feel the effect of that new light that has arisen on you. And this harmony becomes richer and richer, just like something that started out with a simple harmonic between two different notes of two instruments. But now there's undertones and overtones, such fullness and richness. And this vibration spreads through all of existence. This light becomes available to all beings. And the effect of this harmony now brings about restoration of your own being. For anything that's out of balance, it just naturally comes into a state of restoration. And beyond that, to transformation. Let this harmony remain with you. You can tap into it, draw upon it whenever you need to, whenever you forget and get out of balance. So that you can become a source of harmony for other beings. Amen.